The podcast is gonna continue, and you know what it is. It's R&B. Listening to us for free. It's Russ and Blake coming at you right now. The quail squawking away, catching that breeze till you're dead in the grave.
Hey.
Welcome back to R&B Podcast. We're Russ and Blake coming at you on Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth.
Happy
Wow.
Juneteenth, man.
Wow. Honored to be able to do this, do what we do on a day like today. And it happens to be a day after Father's Day, my first Father's Day as a father. So, of course, we got to talk about that. And talk about Father's Day, talk about Juneteenth, two very large blessings in my life and my existence and my lineage, and just really have had an opportunity to reflect on it much more than I had prior to these days coming to me. And I want to hear Russ's perspective on the two separate from mine, because we haven't seen each other through these 2 days, but I know that they are equally important to him.
For sure.
Yeah. So, first of all, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man.
Yeah.
I'm doing great. You know, I was traveling a little bit in Colorado, in Denver specifically, and I got to go to a Juneteenth celebration out there, music celebration, get to experience a different culture in a historically black neighborhood out there called the 5 Points, which is just something I'd learned about over the last few days, and it was a great time.
Yeah,
a lot of great music, food, vibes.
Nice. Yeah, and I guess Denver is a place I don't really think of when I think of black history initially either. Just like we were talking about Arizona, I didn't realize how much black history is here until this weekend. I went to a Juneteenth event, and it was at the Arizona Heritage Center, and there's a couple really cool performances, and the exhibits that they showed there showed what we've discussed before. After the Tulsa massacres happened, a lot of those people from Oklahoma had an opportunity to move to Arizona just a year later and basically have a safer environment, they were told, and have some more opportunities since theirs were taken from them in Oklahoma. So that was cool to know, because I was born in Oklahoma, and Russ has ties to Oklahoma, and I didn't know that there was that connection of our history and black people coming to Arizona in that fashion. So it's just interesting that we've made our way out west and are now finding these details in our early adulthood, right?
Yeah.
And so we kind of talked a bit about how the things that we learned in school, there are definitely a lot of details left out, right? And I was trying to think, because I know I had great teachers. I had great teachers, and they're very intelligent, very friendly, cared about me. And is it the curriculum or something else that prevents us from finding out these pieces of history that relate to us as individuals culturally, but also have a great significance to our country, right?
Right.
And, as we learn these things later on and fill in the blanks as adults, you almost feel betrayed at a point. You're like, oh man, why didn't they tell me these things? I feel like that would have been so helpful for me to know that, right? When you think of the civil rights movement and, the successes, the failures, it kind of just ends when they tell us the story, and they don't really accentuate the fact that fight is continuing, and it has to continue, because just as with Juneteenth, how I think a lot of people don't realize the Emancipation Proclamation was not signed on Juneteenth, right? It was signed 2 years prior, and it took 2 years for the news to basically get to Texas for those slaves to realize that they were legally free. And even then, it was a process, not an event that took place. It didn't just happen overnight. There was a lot of pushback for obvious reasons, and it still just ended in a lot of struggle and unfairness. So, is there anything that you've learned recently related to Juneteenth and kind of this process of ending slavery, because I honestly didn't know a lot of these details until this past year when I've been doing a lot of research on my own time.
Yeah, and you said a lot that has me thinking over here. First, I feel like your sentiment of when you learn these new concepts, just feeling like, wow, I didn't know this. This is new information, and it's mind opening. The interesting thing about African American history is that it feels that way, and so many different things that we can learn. One, because we could be not aware of it, but then also because the history goes back for centuries and centuries and centuries, and then expanding past even the creation of America. And since there's so much information out there about your ancestors, we find ourselves continuously stumbling over that feeling of awe and wow, this is connected to me and these are my people.
Yeah.
That's one reason why I take pride in being a lifelong learner, because I love that feeling and I love sharing it with people. And then you brought up the curriculum in your childhood schools, and that is inspiring to me because I feel like since there is so much information out there of the history, the hard part is how are you going to actually structure it to be able to teach to a class or to another person so it's digestible to a young kid.
Right.
You understand? And that's very difficult to do. So a lot of times I can kind of contribute our past education to more ignorance about what was truly going on rather than like a malevolent plan that was going on.
Right.
But either way, without getting into that, it's just inspirational for us to be able to try to detail out what should be taught.
Yeah.
So to your question that you asked me, what have I learned about Juneteenth that I feel like is significant to now? Like you said, how the Emancipation Proclamation was signed 2 years before that information got to the slaves, 250,000, I think they said, in Texas, that were freed once they learned that legally they were free.
Right.
Why that is so amazing to me is because that shows the power of information. All they were missing was information. They were living in reality of what should have been going on, but the information hadn't reached them yet about what was possible.
Yep.
So that always is very mind-blowing to me because of the way our information now is instantaneous. But we still need some information to free us, metaphorically and literally in their sense.
Right. That is a good point. And the importance of having a network, right? Because maybe if they had more direct contact with other people in other areas, they could have somehow notified each other in a, I guess, more speedy fashion, right? But you just have to look back and think of what they were going through at that time and just be so grateful that they went through it for us. And for us to be able to, again, do this. I always just relate it to this. When I say do this, more literally I'm talking about the show, but I really mean about our lives, like because we do have so much freedom, and there's just so many people that came before us that didn't have the opportunities, or when they were promised the opportunities were taken from them, or they did take advantage of an opportunity and then their successes were stripped from them after the fact, right? And those are just things that we have to be aware of, and not only just be able to show gratitude for our opportunities and the state that we're in after the struggles that have been fought, but also just looking forward and knowing that we're also paving a better road for the people after us. So it's only getting better and better. And sometimes it can look bleak when you look at certain details, and you may think that some sort of progress is not being made or steps have been taken backwards, but you have to look at the big picture. And for it to take 2 years just for one message to get across, right? Every year that we are sharing our message and trying to make sure that the memory of that struggle stays strong, it's very powerful, because clearly, as far as our public education, which most people rely on, that message is not being shared. And that's something that, it bothered me a little bit, but after going to this event over the weekend and having some conversations with people, and also seeing the reactions that I get on social media when I share certain details, it does give me hope. And I do understand that it takes a very intentional effort if you want these things to change.
For sure. And I see it more as kind of a call to action.
Yeah.
Because your ancestors struggled so much to leave this history that you're able to learn about. And it's going to take some accountability and effort on your part or our part to gather that information. And that could look like investing in a trip somewhere to go actually see, the place. Like, for instance, I went to Birmingham, Alabama with my mom, and we went to a Black History museum there that taught me a lot more than I've read or could even watch in documentaries, because I'm sitting there actually looking, at the Birmingham jail Martin Luther King is writing the letter from, and reading the letter, and it brings so much more energy to the situation. So a lot of times it's our responsibility to invest, to get our information, right? I see money if I'm trying to get a book or trying to get some type of information that's behind a paywall as just my investment to doing my part, to learning what I need to learn to be able to teach the things that I feel like should have been taught to myself,
And I've never really looked at it that way, because I did grow up saying like, oh, I don't like history. Oh, history is boring. So, part of that is on me. I wasn't being open to it. And I have made a lot of investment in, buying financial books and self-help books and, books for entertainment purposes, spirituality, but I did lack in putting in the time and the effort to educate myself on that history, and it did show, like you're saying. So it really is partially upon us, because I could relate, back to my school years, like why didn't they teach me about taxes and all these financial things as well? So right. I'm glad that you say it that way, because I can't focus on it just being one topic that may have not been, I guess, portrayed to me in the way that I feel would have been best in hindsight, right? But you could even probably relate it to math, how we do math in real life jobs compared to how we learn it in school. Like, why do we have to do the equations that way? Why can't you use your calculator, right? So all those things probably have reasons to them, but just using it as an analogy to kind of show that, nobody should really get too upset if they feel like what they were taught in school was not really congruent with all of the facts that they learn later in life.
Yeah.
Because it's our duty to build upon that foundational knowledge. You can't learn everything in that amount of time either, right?
100%. And you comparing gathering the information of the history to math and how it helps you kind of do more complex problem solving in the world is great, because that's exactly how it is. When you arm yourself with that information about the history, then you'll recognize symbols and you'll recognize words from the past that are actually trying to tell you something. I'm not taking this into some spiritual or metaphorical sense. I mean literally, if you see some symbol that you learned about and it's significant to a historic event, once you learn about it, it will spark. But if you don't know, it's just going to go past your mind, right? So you're really going to see the world different when you start to learn these things of the past. And it's interesting because I've been there before where my idea of I was not taught about my history was my most strongest idea. You understand? It's almost as I was becoming aware of these things and I'm going around saying, oh, I wasn't taught about my history. I wasn't taught about my history. And that was like the highest level thought I had. That was diminishing what I could be, because I thought that was the work, was to learn that. But it's no, you learn that, so now who's going to teach you, or do you want to learn?
About the history. Yeah, put in that work. Don't just complain about it, right? Yeah, there's always a solution to whatever it is that's frustrating us, and it usually is in our power to make it better. So I'm glad you point that out as well. Man, yeah. So Father's Day. Father's Day this week came before Juneteenth, so let's scale back a second here, because I feel like, well, they're just so interrelated. But me as a father, as a Black father, it is very important to me because there's this stigma behind Black fathers, right? And I've even had people, tell me that I'm breaking the stigma, and it feels good, but it also is a little bit upsetting that there's details being neglected of the situations that people are living in when they end up starting a family, whether it's intentional or not. I'm very blessed, to live in the area that I live in, grow up in the area that I've grown up in, have the education that I've had. So, I think some of the people that the stigma may have originated with may not have had all of the opportunities that I had and all the guidance and all of the safety measures, right? And I am very proud to be a face to show that stereotype is not true of what a black father is. But I also want people to know that I'm not the only one. I'm glad that I'm able to share my journey and people are able to see that and just know that whatever you're exposed to on the internet is not all that's there, right? There's so much going on in the world that we aren't aware of, but we think behind a screen and with news reporters, whatever it may be, all of the information that there is to be fed is being fed to us. But we're only fed certain things, and we have to be aware of the outlets that we fall towards, because there's always more beauty lying in this world. And my dad has talked to me about the importance of watching the news and being aware of things going on in your community, which I do understand him telling me that, and I'm glad that he shared that with me. But you do have to also use your discernment and realize that there's a lot of good things that you might have to go find, because some of these news sources aren't going to just share all those good things with you, but they are there, and they're there in great proportions as well. And so, me as a father, I have to realize these positive aspects of the world, because when I was first having a kid, it was really scary. I felt like I was always going to be in protection mode, and especially having a daughter, right? Because you just know how guys are. And I think every dad has said that. Like, I know how guys are. I know how I was when I was a kid, right? And just knowing that there are people in this world that care about me a lot, and I see how much support and love there is for my daughter as well. And so me as a dad, I'm always going to put that love out into the world, because it's not only going to come back to me, but it's going to come back to me and my family. It's going to come back to my daughter. And I'm going to show her how to put that love out into this world and do it the same. But also know that me doing that positive effort continuously is going to protect her in turn too, because people feel that energy, and then people recognize me, recognize her. We have a lot of players in our field, and in a scary world, it's important to put yourself in a position where you can feel that way, because we deserve to live freely, right? And that's not only physically free, but mentally free. And you have to feel safe to be mentally free. But there's a lot of chaos in the world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just so fitting that the following couple of days leads into Juneteenth, because that's just a perfect analogy for how that can feel in the world.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really happy that you are the example to combat the kind of propaganda that we're fed about black fathers, because when we look at the real life experience, a lot of people are doing a great job and being amazing leaders and intellectual
Or at least trying
leaders.
their best, right?
At least trying their
Yeah.
best. And, they're up against plenty statistics that say that they are going to fail, right? And they're in the face of adversity. Another nod to Juneteenth. This is why these 2 days kind of go together so well. Now, I want to ask you, Blake, as a first Father's Day, did you feel that you were appreciated, that you were loved?
Oh, yeah. Like the whole weekend, not even just a day. So, yeah. Again, glad today was Juneteenth, because my wife had work off, so we really just treated it like a 3-day family weekend and celebrated it the way that I feel every father should, just spending time with your family. And I wouldn't have done it any other way. Went golfing with Maddie Saturday morning, spent the rest of the day with her and Mila, and did some cooking and watched some TV and hung out and played games, had a good time. And I look forward to doing that again and again, right? And some people, Father's Day is not an exciting day for them, but I didn't realize how exciting of a day it was going to be for me. So it's just cool that I get to look forward to that each year. And then also, not just that day, but it just brought light to, not that I wasn't aware, but how beautiful my situation is. And I don't get to just do that on Father's Day. Like, that's my life now. So, yeah, it's cool. a lot of reflection this weekend as I did more research about Juneteenth and history and just trying to understand myself and my place in this world and the transition I'm going into as being a father, because I feel like every day I'm being a little bit more like my dad. I keep saying that, but I think that he would agree I'm going to be like 2.0 version, right? I'm taking all the good qualities, and I see a lot of the things that he's taught me over time, and I also see how they relate to our history.
Right.
And, some of the positive, some of the negative things, and some of the things that we agree and disagree on, and just where he's from in Mississippi, and the history that is in that area with that side of my family, and then my mom from Arkansas. So a lot of these things that we talk about, I want people listening to this to realize that I'm very closely related to all of these events and all of this history. Some people, I have friends that they're African Americans, they're Black Americans, but they're first generation Americans. Like their parents came from Africa in the mid 1900s, right? Or like, that's a weird way to say that, but it's just a different experience when your family was involved with slavery, and you know that your family is from these areas that are full of plantations and that were in the Jim Crow South and that were part of the Confederacy, right? And so these are things that I was never really allowed to draw these direct lines to. I knew it was related to me, but not having all these details and really being able to see the timeline and being able to think of my family and the age of my family members that are still alive. My great grandma, who's 95 years old, right? Where does that put her in all of this, right? Right in the middle of it. So I just have to be so grateful as I uncover these details, and it gives me so much more, drive, and makes me feel capable, because all the things that I'm dealing with are easy compared to all the other stuff that the rest of my ancestors had to deal with. So with these resources that I have in the current state of the world, it makes me feel like I can't lose. I have too many people that want me to succeed, but at the same time, you can't be complacent, because when you're in that situation, there's always someone that wants to see you fall, and I just always try to remind myself of that, but just enjoy every moment while I have it and try to keep on building. And having a daughter is so empowering along that same journey, and that realization, and knowing that I'm going to carry on that the progress that has been made.
For
because
sure.
We have a lot of momentum. We do. And not just my family, but, Black people as a whole.
Yeah. Whenever we have these days like Juneteenth or Black History Month, where as a collective we're highlighting the Black historic events, it always makes me reflect and think that the way we are now is almost like a Uno reverse card, where we just use that trauma and that pain to feel confident and not afraid. How am I going to be afraid of judgment of my peers when, like you're saying, my grandma was telling me stories about brutality and racism from her childhood. I can't come here and then be, I'm afraid of being judged by someone or looking like I'm bad at something.
Right.
So it is kind of the reward for all those ancestral struggles is that we can kind of remove a little more fear, which all human beings can. I'm not trying to say it's an only Black thing, but what I'm saying is through those cultural stories, it made it seem like other things are less scary.
Right.
Because like you, my grandma grew up, she's not alive anymore, but she grew up in the South, and she used to tell me stories all the time when I was younger about what she would see. She's seen men hanging in trees lynched when she was a little girl walking down the street. She tells me the story and how it felt when she saw the body there. And she used to tell me that all the time when I was little, just to kind of drive home the point of what environment she grew up in, so I could understand her point of view a little more. Because if you didn't understand her point of view, she might have sounded paranoid.
Right.
But if you got to know her history, it'd be, okay, I understand why she might see these things with a little more rigid feeling than other people. Now, for me, I can just integrate those stories and remove more fear from my life because I don't have to go through that type of brutality.
Right. God willing.
God willing.
So yeah, over the weekend I got to hear the mayor of Tempe,
Corey Woods.
speak. Cool guy, and he talked about something that I saw a friend of ours, Trey, post about how a lot of the streets and parks
Middle schools.
in middle schools
Yeah,
in
man.
Tempe have been named after 1920 or people that are related to the 1920 KKK, and that has been, I guess, exposed, and it's being changed, and all those names are being changed, and they're going through and making sure that those pieces of history are not what is allowed to, continue and thrive, and especially not be, I guess, tied to our children and their education in that way, right? Because those are things that definitely ring alarms to me, and then I look back on my experience and start to question. But again, it's good to see that those efforts are being made, and I'm very grateful that we do have, black leaders in Arizona. We have, I think, a black police chief in Phoenix, right?
Yeah, woman,
Yeah,
black police
female
chief.
black police chief in Phoenix.
I don't know if she's still active though. I think she may have resigned recently.
Yeah, but one of the neighboring cities still does, though, I believe. And regardless of the role, there we do have people in our community that are making sure that they have, I guess, some leverage for us, right? And they have a place for our voice to be heard and for us to try to be treated fairly. And Russ, you coming from a family that has a lot of ties into the police force, especially with your grandpa in the Phoenix area, that's something that is very important. And we talked about how that's frowned upon by some people in our community. They don't think that it's positive for a black person to want to be a police officer, but we both disagree with that stance because we feel that representation has to be there if you expect for there to be fair treatment, especially if there has been a track record of that fair treatment not being present, because I don't see how else you can realistically expect there to be change. So I am personally very appreciative of that being the case, that there are black people that are interested in being police officers. And I must say that I'm appreciative that we have law enforcement. I just wish that the training and the consistent behavior of said enforcement was a bit different. But those are things that are necessary in our society. They just have to be reformed so that they're able to operate in an appropriate fashion.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, those implicit bias trainings, and then also having people that are specified to work with possible people who are dealing with mental health problems. There are plenty of things that they bring up that would be better for the community. But like you're saying, as far as black Americans that want to become police officers, I think it is a good thing. The same way I believe educators, other professions that serve the community.
Definitely.
Right, we need to be there if we want to be able to do the things that we want, which is like more justice and more good education, all these other things that are going on that we desire. So for me, I'm always trying to encourage people when they have something that weighs heavy on their heart that they feel like needs to be changed, just go do it. One great thing I love about my job is that I get to play with these different concepts of cultural curriculum and see what hits home in a classroom, see what's easy for me to communicate, see what raises more questions. Because when you're learning about your own identity and you're learning things that you didn't know before, it's a light bulb going off in the mind of these children.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a weird connection right now, but I was watching Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer, yesterday, and this family had this Doberman that was super anxious, would bark at dogs whenever they walked past, and they couldn't control it on a walk. It would go crazy, all these different things. And Cesar Millan took this couple to a dog park and told them to teach their dog how to run through this tunnel thing. And at first the dog was hesitant, and then he learned to go through it, and he's just wagging his tail, and you can see his mind's racing, but he's working these things out in his mind. And Cesar Millan's telling the couple that owns the dog that this dog is now going to be more calm because you're giving him a mental activity to learn. So he's growing his mind, he's using his process, and then he's not going to be as anxious when he's chilling. He's not going to want to fight and do all these aggressive things.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made me think, like, that truly is how it is for some of our kids too. They'll be bored unless you give them something for their mind to actually grow and play with, like the information that's going to help them learn more things.
Mm-hmm.
So I just heard that, and it made me think about how so many of the African American students in their classes are just bored, not hearing anything that relates to them, not hearing anything that hits home about their identity and their history and something that's going to make them grow within who they are.
Right. And then so to touch back on your history, do you know how long you've had police in your family?
No, because the thing about my grandfather, who, when he was killed in the line of duty, he was a sergeant in the Phoenix Police Force. I'm sorry, a detective in the Phoenix Police Force. Mm-hmm. But he was just a man who had many jobs before he got into being a police officer. You know, I've heard these stories about he was a garbage collector, a janitor. He was just one of those dudes that was trying to work all the time, had a family, working 12 hours, grinding to get money and whatnot, and then probably had an opportunity to join the police force and climbed up the ranks in that by working with them. But it wasn't really anything that was a cultural thing, which is probably like a lot of black people when it comes to military history and police history. It was probably just maybe one of the best opportunities for them at the time. You know,
so it's just by chance that you have cousin that's currently a police officer.
More people in my family who are black police officers, and I don't know if they had some type of motivation because of a prior person. That'd be a good question to ask them, but I think a lot of it comes with the opportunity of the job.
Yeah, we'll have to do a little digging. I came across I forget the actual name of the group. Something about black genealogy and lineage or heritage in Arizona. They help people trace back the lineage of black people and know their history, because, you know, a lot of Ancestry.com, DNA.com, they'll tell you like a region of Africa that you're from, right? But it won't really give you details and tell you like a specific country or really have much information, because a lot of the people that came from Africa or that were brought from Africa to America didn't have documentation, didn't have information and things to be carried on in that fashion. So a lot of it kind of stops as far as the information and the names and the details go. But this group in Arizona, they help people uncover some of those details and be a little more in touch with their history and their lineage. And I know that my aunt has tried to do that before, and I haven't really followed up on the progress that she's had there, but I'm pretty sure what she had did stop in like the late 1800s. I'm sure a lot of people run into that issue that have Black American history. So that's something that I kind of look forward to trying to explore and take advantage of, because I thought that was cool that they were offering that. And I hadn't really heard of anyone making a big effort to give other black people that similar opportunity.
Yeah. And one thing that I do know about history of African American men, if you take them back to tribal times, this is men in general, an archetypal man throughout history was usually some type of, they say, hunter-gatherer, right? They're out there either fighting and what they need to do to protect their home, or they're trying to gather things, which all takes courage and possibly physical confrontation. So it's interesting to me because some of these positions that men in our culture will do now kind of stems back to that drive of the old times to be the protector, right, and be the one who fends off. And sometimes that's to our detriment, right? There's a lot, men are more likely to do violent crimes and get arrested, and also we feel fulfilled when we do it the right way and truly protect our family. That's why it's so dope that you felt love and appreciated on your Father's Day, because you're doing things the right way. You know, you're taking that history of what's been going on and now utilizing it in the correct way. But the only reason I bring that up is because jobs like police officer, military, these other types of things could come natural to the spirit of a black man because of the history of what they had to do to be able to protect their own.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of ways to get drawn into service jobs, right? I know I have a lot of military in my family, and it stems back from, the world wars. That was black people's kind of first opportunity in a lot of places, and, they were treated fairly to an extent at some times, and that was the closest they got to fairness when they were fighting for their country, right? And a lot of them unfortunately were betrayed after the war was over when they came back. And for our people to continue to fight for our country, I think speaks great volumes. And not only, just for the pride of doing so, but obviously there's benefits to being in the military, and having those family ties within the military and taking advantage of those benefits over time, I think has been a way to kind of navigate some of the barriers that have been made. You talk about 40 acres and a mule. That was something that we were promised after emancipation, but the vast majority of black people weren't able to actually get the land that they were promised and get that mule. And a lot of the land that was distributed was not good land that you could use for farming or building infrastructure. So it really did not give even a fraction of the benefit that it was portrayed to do. And then on top of that, some of that land that was distributed was given back to the white owners that had previously owned the land. And that was after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and Thomas Jefferson or whoever came into office afterwards and tried to wipe away all the stuff that he had done, basically. So, we see that a lot where political leaders will try to do things for a certain group, and then, we have changes of power, and it doesn't fit the agenda, and things can be reversed, unfortunately, sometimes. And that's why it is just so important for us to be continuously educated and aware of these things that are being done and the changes that are being made, so that we can make sure when somebody wants to overturn them, we have an educated response to combat it if necessary.
Yeah. And if you want to be honest, a lot of the groups that were set up to instill fear in the African American communities throughout history were technically terrorizing these people.
Oh, yeah.
That's the description of a terrorist, is instilling fear into people to make it hard for them to maneuver out in the world. And that is one of the best parts about learning more about the history, is because you see that the variable that is going to go all through this is that they want you to be afraid. Mm-hmm. So if you're able to take that and approach this life now where you are protected, no one's going to brutalize you as long as you're being aware and staying on your P's and Q's. Then you remove the fear and you come out here and you do all the stuff that you want to do. Mm-hmm. And you try to master skills, and you go in the face of these crowds and you stand with your head tall, you do your thing, you come back to protect your family. Mm-hmm. And you come back out in the world and get it cracking, because there is no reason to feel afraid out here anymore.
Yeah.
The fear was always false. They tried their hardest to terrorize and make you feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to anymore.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, because that Juneteenth event I was at yesterday, there's a little girl that sang, and I wish I remember her name, but she was only 7 years old or something, but she was so smart, and she was standing up there telling everybody, I'm honored to be able to sing today. She understood the importance of Juneteenth, which I know I didn't at that age, so I thought that was super cool. But she gave a little PSA. She was like, I want everybody to know I am very nervous, but if you want to do something, you just go do it. It doesn't matter if people agree with you, and you should always be confident and follow your dreams. And I was like, oh my God. Okay, Blake, don't cry. She didn't even start singing yet. But she was actually really good at singing. She was animated, and it was just really, I guess it warmed my heart to see that, and to have a little girl have that education and be that confident. Obviously has great parents, but to tie that confidence to her history and know the importance of that day, I thought that was all really important and special for me to see, because it's just something that, especially with children, you don't expect, especially today's children, to be interested in history. I think that that's really hard to accomplish now. And I was just, I guess, motivated to raise my daughter to hopefully be similar to that. I never thought I would see a little girl that, I've kind of made a role model for me, for my daughter, right? But it was an interesting experience, and I look forward to having more experiences like that moving forward, because I'm just surprised every day. I pay a lot more attention to little kids now, and they're just soaking everything up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much opportunity there, not only for education, but obviously for actionable things like what you're actually going to go do with the world. And like you said, being a doer. I've been trying to be more of a doer, not think about stuff as much. Once I think about it and I have a plan, I have to go act upon it, or else it's never going to get done.
Mm-hmm.
Things are going to just pile up, and that's not only with my daily activities, but all the things that I aspire to do and the goals that I have. Even if I fall off of that, I know that as soon as I step back on, I'm moving in the right direction, and there's no reason for me to just stop if it's something that I truly care about.
Yeah.
And little reminders like that, I tell people, don't shy away from inspiration. Don't shy away from motivation. If you can be inspired by a 7-year-old girl, allow yourself to feel that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't think that they can learn anything from someone who doesn't actually have more knowledge than them.
Yeah.
But learning is more than just gathering information. It's actually observing and forming your own interpretation of the things that are happening, right? So when you have those opportunities, it is going to take a conscious effort for you to actually put it to use and let that be something that's going to drive you forward and be meaningful. But it is up to you to make sure that it's not in vain, because it
Mm-hmm.
can easily just be forgotten. And then little moments like that, I definitely don't let be forgotten, just because over time, if that's what I'm piling up in my memory and adding to my arsenal, there's just so much positivity underlying my efforts that it feels like I can't fail. And I know that that's not real. I know that failure's lurking around the corner in some way or another, but it's not something that's going to instill fear in me. And that's only because I know that as soon as I fail, I'm going to use that failure to benefit me and push me to not fail in the same way, at least.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I feel that. And for you to be able to recognize the inspiration in all these different types of people is such a power. I always feel bad if somebody feels like they can't be inspired by a race, gender, age, using these different indicators to cut off gaining information from them, because you're cutting yourself off to so much. As you were saying that, I'm thinking back to when I first started working out of school, there was this young boy who his teacher was trying to teach him the concept of these treaties that happened between America and the Native Americans in the past, and how it went down and all these things. And his answer on his paper was along the lines of, America can't purchase or own the land of the Native Americans because nobody can own land. You can't own the land. It's trees and grass and all these other things. And the teachers are just like, wrong, and then after school, I'm in this room hanging out with them, and they were like, man, can you believe that student said that? He's just so wrong. The answer was this treaty and this plot of land and this border. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, why are you guys saying this? Because think about what he's saying.
Right.
He feels the same way some of those Native Americans felt, and he doesn't even know it. That's just, he's speaking from his soul about what you can own and put a border on. So it's just always interesting, because before you count out the perspective of a child or someone who you might deem as ignorant, like, you should take heed or kind of think about what it is that they're saying, and you might find a lot of beauty in it.
Yeah. Sometimes you take stuff in a literal sense, and it can open you up to a little door of, I guess, wonders, because that interpretation, the lack thereof, is what caused a lot of issues. A group feeling they're being fair by, you can have this, and then the group they're being fair to still doesn't understand.
Yeah,
right?
like, have this land.
Like, what do you mean?
This is a whole being
we
that
live
exists.
on this,
yeah,
right?
and we're grateful for it, and it feeds us, and we're community. We're communal with
Their
it.
whole view of the land was not property.
Right.
They were one with the land, like you're saying. So that's pretty cool. And I think a lot of teachers really have to put themselves in a situation where they give themselves an opportunity to learn from the kids, right? And that's a lesson that they should be able to take moving forward, to be able to explain to kids a little bit better, because that's also the response that you need as a teacher, wanting to explain, at least not ridicule and just say that you're wrong. And I think that's one of the problems that we have in our education system, that there often is this kind of habitual effort to make people think there's one right answer, and that's hardly ever the case. Even in math, there's more than one right way to get the answer, but kids get docked off because they didn't get the answer the right way, right? So that's something that I hope, if anyone younger's listening to this, just understand the purpose of the education system, right? It's foundation, it's building blocks. Yes, we want to all get A's and go to the best school you can go to, right? If college is your route, but there's things that are possibly going to stand in the way of that, and if that's the case, that's okay. That doesn't mean you can't get educated.
For sure. And I have this conversation with kids all the time. You know, if you're smart enough and mature enough to say, how come I'm not learning about this, then you should be mature enough to get a library card and hop on the internet and do your research. You know what I'm saying? Because you know the question to ask. Go type it in. Go search it up. You know, don't.
One other thing I was going to point out, though, is, rest in peace, Miss Adams. You remember Miss Adams?
Yeah, I remember Miss Adams.
She passed away?
I did not know she passed away.
Yeah, she
That's
did.
crazy. Yeah, rest in peace.
Either last year or the year before. But very sweet lady. One thing that frustrated me with Miss Adams' class in high school was she wouldn't let us get 100% on whatever type of essays we had to write. And I never understood that, because she'd tell me how great it was. I was like, all right, so why I get a 95%, right? And she's like, well, there's always room for improvement. And so that was upsetting for me, because I'm worried about the grade. And that's what school teaches us to worry about, is the grade. I want the highest grade. I want to try to get 100% in all my classes, because the A+ is better than the A-, right? But later on, it took me so long because that I thought that was unfair of her, right? But then I thought about it, and I was like, you know what, there is always room for improvement. What we're doing right now in this production, we know we're going to always improve. There's no peak to this, right? Everything that we do, there's room for improvement, and that's how people become great at things. That's how legends are born, right? And that's why people like LeBron and Kobe never give up, and people like Tom Brady never want to retire, because they know there's always improvements to be made and they can do better. And so, again, changing your perspective when you're met with something you disagree with can be so powerful, because if I had realized that earlier on, that might have given me opportunity to excel in a few other areas of my life. And all these lessons that we learn are transferable, and I think all of the things we disagree with are opportunities to learn.
Yeah.
Whether it's going to be us learning about someone else's perspective or learning more about our views on something. A disagreement is something that bothers you when you hear it. It should take some more investigation and be, in turn, an opportunity.
Yeah. And I know for sure me and you had different experiences of Miss Adams' grades, because I was never even getting 90s or 80s when I was in high school. So I feel you. But as you're saying that, it made me think, choosing your friends, man. Like, how many of these kids really have a friend that they could say, you're sitting here talking about how you wanted to get A+ and A- and everything. And that's how I've known you to be since I've known you.
Right.
That's a cheat code for me to have a friend that feels that way, you know, as I'm reflecting on my own path, because a lot of kids are really just going downhill because of the group that they're with.
Right.
And I always have these conversations with students who talk to me about the friend who is not trying to do better and making them feel like they're weird for trying. And this is always going to be my message of get out of that relationship. Even if you are 12 and you feel like more friends aren't going to come, like, you got to get out of that relationship, because like you will go as far as the people you keep around you.
All right. Well, it's starting to get dark out here. For those of y'all listening just on the audio streaming platform, we are recording outside. I'm sure you've heard a little bit of tweets from the birds, a little bit of wind, some nature sounds, but I've liked this vibe.
Yeah.
I like this vibe. Thank God we live in Arizona. It's been a little more of a mild evening. It's starting to get a little toasty out, but this has been a great conversation. Again, so grateful to be a father. I'm grateful to be black. Proud to be black.
Happy to be free.
Happy to be
free, man.
Black father.
Because
in
that
America.
freedom, man, there is nothing sweeter. Because what freedom means is that you have the ability to wake up and mold yourself into what you want.
So I was gonna say, shout out to the fathers, all the fathers out there. Just know that you guys have the ability to be a great father, and if you're not already doing that, get on it because you're free, right? And you gotta be grateful for that. And this is one of the blessings that has become your life. So take responsibility for it, yeah. Juneteenth, I hope you guys learned something out of this today. Again, something very, very important, not only to me, not only to Russ, but to our entire world, because it ended slavery.
And if you don't feel that way, then take away all the hip hop, R&B, and pop songs that you've loved in the last 60 years. Because without some Juneteenth, without some end of slavery, you're not getting all that pop culture. You're not seeing Michael Jordan dunk from the free throw line. You know what I'm saying? You're not seeing Bron play above the rim the way he did. You're not seeing all these amazing
not
things.
To no Michael Jackson, you don't
Drizzy
get no
Drake,
Whitney Houston, you don't get no Jay-Z, you don't get no Beyonce, you don't get none of that.
You don't get none of that.
So,
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Right. No, I was about to say, not even just entertainers,
bro.
Right? Just so grateful that we're able to be a part of the Black community. And I think that, one day we may be household names for something like that. But right now, we're just so grateful to be in your ear, whoever's listening. And you should know we are on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and catch some clips on the gram. But R&B Podcast is alive and thriving. And thank you so much for listening. If I didn't thank God for this opportunity, thank you, God, that we had this opportunity. And thank you, God, that we lived to see this Juneteenth. And thank you all again. And like last week, we'll see you next week.
Thank you, God. Peace.
Peace.